Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of WTF Walk the Floors. I'm Stephanie Ledger with First Rate Hospitality, and I'm with my co-host, Michelle Klein. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hi, Stephanie. How are you? I'm doing great.
Great. Well, what do we got going on today?
We have a very interesting topic and a very cool guest. So, our guest is Žana from Devine Hospitality. She's all the way from California. And Žana, welcome to the show. We're going to allow you to tell us a little bit about yourself. And then we're going to go into the topic of today, which is all about food and beverage, and mainly what do we do on the floor when we want to turn tables? And when that's the case, how is that potentially affecting the experience? So, kick us off. Tell us who you are, what you do, and why should people be listening today?
Hi, guys. It's such pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invite. So as introduced, my name is Žana. My own company is called Žana Devine Hospitality, and I do this because I live, breathe, and love hospitality. I've been doing this since I'm basically 14. Don't ask me how old I am, but I've been doing it since a minute. And your topic today is wonderful. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about because it's literally all about making money. Right? So the majority of hospitality is, as we all know, no matter if we're a manager, if we're a hostess, if we're a waiter, if we are a busboy, whoever we are in the industry, we all want to make money. But the other side of hospitality is really to give our people and our guests really the warmthness of the actual hospitality aspect, right? Which is to make them feel warm, which is to make them feel welcome, which is to make them feel recognized. And to your question, how can we turn tables in a sense faster, and why we do what we do is essentially two things. So one is, yes, you should be grateful for people wanting to come and sit with you, but then you also have to think management-wise and business-wise, because the more you flip your tables, the more revenue you essentially make. But you can also just look at it from a completely different point of view, where you don't want people to feel like being kicked out of your place either, right? That's not a nice thing. People don't really like to feel like rushed or anything. And my biggest pet peeve always been if waiters just dropping their checks. Like, this is the first thing that I teach everywhere where I go, is to please not do that. It's so not personal. Let people really ask for the check whenever they're ready to go. But when it comes to the business side, yes, we have to be very mindful, especially when we're busy, especially on big holidays like Mother's Day and Valentine's Day, and big places, big holidays where we want to make a bunch of money. Is how can we faster flip tables, right? And just to answer your question very fast, is to train our people correctly. Because the more we know how to sell on the table, at one table, and we do that with all the tables we have, the more revenue we can pull. And how do we do that? Is simply by product knowledge. We need to really, now more than ever, take the time to train our staff in what wines do we have? How do we sell wine? How does the wine even taste? What pairs with each wine? What do we have behind the bar? What liquors? What type of liquors? Right? What kind of cocktails? Those are all many money-making tools. But if your waiters or managers or hostesses or whoever basically runs your floor don't really know too much about the product, it's really difficult, because then a lot of times people get into the bracket of being an order taker. And that can be very dangerous for a business, because everybody can take an order, but not everybody can sell. And a lot of people don't really see that about being a waitress, but you are essentially a sales agent, right? And so this is what I like to focus on, is to turn service into sales, pretty much.
So, Žana, we have emerging leaders as part of our audience, and for those who perhaps don't have as much experience, walk us through what the difference is, in your opinion, of the order taker and the actual server that can sell, that has that product knowledge, and how is that so different, and how is that going to move the needle?
Sure. So I feel like the major difference between an order taker and somebody that understands how to sell is, first of all, how to be engaging with a guest. right? Like you got to be able to read body language. That's not something I can teach you necessarily, even though with a bit training I can, but it's natural inside of somebody. Like you got to know when to step in, when to pull back, when to push, when to pull. It's a little bit of a, energy game, I want to call it, right? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, the more you know about your own products, which are on your menu in your restaurant, the restaurant or hotel or resort or casino, wherever you work, the better you can sell. And if your establishment has some kind of agreements with the other departments, let's just say casinos, for instance, or resorts, if me as a waiter, I sell massages in the spa, what do I get out of that? If your company is willing to kind of like come up with promos or bonuses for their staff, not only do they sell while the guest is having dinner with you, but they're also selling now a massage for the spa. But why shouldn't the waiter get something out of that? I'm not saying it's a must. I'm just saying it's a simple, great idea of encourage your people to, first of all, have cross-board knowledge of what's happening in your establishment. And second of all, why not reward the person that sells the most? I love sales. It's wonderful. And how do you move the needle? By simply, how to talk about your product. And why? Because you know how they taste. So another big pet peeve of mine is when we don't have staff short meetings after each shift, and we don't let our people taste our products.
Oh my gosh,
right?
absolutely.
Yes.
The amount of times that I've seen that going
Right.
into a restaurant, it's ridiculous. Like, how are you supposed to describe the dish? Honestly, describe the dish
Right.
if you've never tasted it.
Right. And I understand if you are, for instance, vegan, right, or vegetarian, and you don't eat meat, I totally get that, and I'm absolutely respecting that. And I'm not saying that person cannot be the major seller of the day either, because they can. But
you
it's
can always
about
ask, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Exactly. You have to be willing. You have to be willing from inside of you, wanting to really crave the answers for you to be successful, right? And that exactly is the major key point. What makes you from an order taker to a seller is you want to be successful. You want to be the person that really engages with your guests and really just not only take an order, but also let them decide, in a sense, for themselves. How do you feel? You feel like a salad? You feel hungry? You're light hungry? You're very hungry? You feel like pasta? You feel like meat? You feel like fish? Let's talk about the menu. Let me not just give you the menu and tell you everything is good on the menu. Like,
I hate
talk to me, talk to me, like make it juicy for me, make it interesting for me, paint me a picture with your verbal knowledge of how does this wine taste, what would it go great with, and also talk to me already at the beginning about wonderful desserts, because you see a lot of places have wonderful desserts, but they are not being mentioned at the beginning. Like certain things take longer and they're not even being mentioned, so people not even aware of, and now it's time for them to go, oh, a souffle would take 40 minutes. Well, I don't have 40 minutes to wait, because I wish you would have told me at the beginning. Like certain things where people are just not aware of how to sell on a table or at a table, and how to multiply that with multiple tables, because a myth in hospitality is really you have to have a bunch of tables to make a bunch of money. No, you don't.
Not true. Not true
No,
at
you
all.
No.
Not at all.
And I think with a lot of the things that you've been saying is, one is having that pre-shift where you are tasting the meal, and if you are having any allergies or certain restrictions and dietary needs that like how you were saying for vegan, but this is a great time that you're also engaging with your team, and you're hearing with the other servers, like maybe it's the senior servers that they're like, oh yes, this is the way that I describe, a salmon dish, because for instance, for me, I don't like eating fish. And so this is a great way that when I was a server and I was hearing the other servers of how they are able to illustrate that salmon dish, because also too, when I was doing on the other side of the mystery shopping and then testing the server, and then they'll be like, oh yes, the salmon dish, it's the best. Well, obviously because it's the most expensive one, but why is it the best? And now being able to describe it, and now already that's putting a bad taste, because I'm having already that assumption of why you are recommending it, because you're trying to sell the most highest item, but maybe I actually want just 2 appetizers where those actually equal out to be more than just an entree.
Yeah, and it's also, while your guests are eating, and you are just being on top of your table, so to call,
Yes.
right? Like, I mean, you can't just take an order and move away and not never come back, or just barely touch the table. Like, you really want to be on top of the tables. And that's why my personal opinion is always to give even your best waiters not more than 6 tables at the time, just because out of realisticness, you cannot be on top of your tables when you are a fine dining restaurant. I'm not talking, a quick meal in between. I'm literally talking like, fine dining features, with multiple courses, with, marking the plate, marking for the next dish, and having wine for every course. Like, it's unrealistic for you to be on top of your tables if you have so many that you spreading yourself so thin. And this is where the non-selling part comes in too, because you can literally focus on selling at the table. And it could be simple things. You see, people really think like, dessert, who wants dessert? Who wants a starter to drink? Who wants a digestif? Who wants an aperitif? But those are your money-making aspects. Your espresso at the end, your cappuccino, your latte macchiato, all of those things are really selling aspects at the end of a meal to round it up. And believe it or not, people only then start to get into the, let's have dessert wine, make it a bottle, make it this, make it that, and then here you are, not even thinking, but because you warm and you're selling and you're not being pushy, but you are trying to make money after all, right? People are engaging with you, and another thing is also know your menu on the heart. Know it inside of here. Let you tell them what they're going to eat tonight. You see, when I worked in really, really upscale Italian places back in the days, what menu? We went there, we told the guests basically what's happening tonight. This is what we're going to have for appetizer. This is what we're going to have for dinner. And they're like, okay, let's bring it out. Nobody asked, you want bottle? You want this? Water was on the table. Wines kept coming. So, I mean, I feel like that's hospitality, because really people that are coming out for a nice dinner, believe me, they don't care. They want to be treated nicely. They want to have a good time. They want to forget about their everyday, the fight with the wife, the fight with the husband, the whatever in the business, the kids, the whatever. They just want to have a nice meal and a nice time, right? And if you are knowing really how to jump in as a good server, when to, like I said, pull and push, right? Touch and go away, like engage and move out. Like it's energy too, right? It's body. It's kind of like, body language.
Yes. Now, moving forward too, so now we're able to upsell and being confident when we're talking to our guests and, raising that check. But now we're having those guests that are sitting there and not being able to turn the table. And I think it takes a lot of finesse when you're approaching the table, instead of being like, okay, here's the check, sign it and leave. And also too, that's the lasting impression, or one of the lasting impressions, because that, on the gratuity side too. But what do you have for our listeners as well that, they're still trying to upsell on their check, but then also too, they know that the more that they're turning their tables for the night, that, the better at the end of the night it's going to be for them.
And I would add to that before you answer, Žana, is so that, because if we're thinking high-end experience, the last thing you want is for your server to feel like you're being pushed, right? We or like served too fast. So we go from appetizer to entree to, right? So how do you recommend that pace happens? What are some of those tips for that pace to happen? So again, you're not being pushed, but at the same time, you're able to turn your tables. And at the same time, the experience continues to be impeccable.
So I feel it's very important to understand if there's a big holiday, let's just take Valentine's Day, for instance, right? And we know we're going to have a lot of reservations. It is totally okay to let your guests know from the very beginning, we're completely booked this evening. We have a lot of reservations. We do appreciate you coming and eating with us. However, we do want to accommodate all our other guests that come on regular basis with us tonight too. And unfortunately for tonight, we would have to possibly within a 2.5 hour window, kind of like just be for you to be aware of. It's okay to say that to guests. It's not like, oh my God, don't ever say that, but be vocal. The more honest you are, the more vocal you are with your guests, the more appreciativeness and honesty comes back from your guests. You see, if you try to cover up, you're going to make people feel even more BS. But if you are really honest and upfront, this is what's happening tonight, and then you can vocalize yourself. And then the other thing is, if you're not busy, don't try to rush anybody out. You get me? Like, you have to be really look at your floor plan, look at your reservations, look at how your floor is moving. If you're moving on a nice pace and you have that 1 or 2 tables sitting and you can't turn it, but you are moving nicely, who cares? Let them sit. It's okay. You're not losing anything, but you're only making yourself look sour in their eyes. And as we all know, one person talks to 7 people negatively. Right? Yeah. So we don't want to cause no waves, but we also want to be aware of, we are a business after all, but we are a business that requires people to come back. So if anything, I would always bite the bullet of losing a little bit, knowing that they had a fantastic time, and they probably go and say, you know what, they didn't even push us, they didn't ask for nothing. Is there going to be 1 or 2 or 3 in between that is not going to think this way? Absolutely. Comes with the business, right? But in general, I feel like it's always a good thing to just be super honest. This is where we stand tonight. We love to have you, but unfortunately, we are fully booked. Within a 2-hour frame, we will come and make our rounds and check in with you. Absolutely will not rush you out, but just please be aware that we are completely fully booked. And people will understand. Even if you already say that at the beginning on the phone call when they make the reservation. You see, the earlier people are aware of what is happening, the better they can prepare and you can prepare.
Absolutely. And even vice versa, it comes to an example of the chocolate souffle, of how many times, the server, when the guest is ordering that and letting them know that, yes, this is a dessert that takes 30 minutes. So in case those guests are trying to go out to the theater or out to somewhere else after dinner, it's the same thing as, communicating also to for those meal items that do take longer to prepare. But then also too, when they say yes, oh, would you want to have an espresso or cappuccino while you're waiting? So the guest isn't just standing there or sitting there and being like, okay,
and I feel like, and it's such a great point, Stephanie, because I feel like that's exactly where your selling skills would come in.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's exactly where selling skills would come in, because after all, we want our guests to feel warm and welcome, but we know when somebody orders a nice T-bone steak that we all know what the price is, or like a surf and turf or whatever, trust me, they're going to have money for a little appetizer in between, or like a little 2-3 cocktails, or even a bottle of wine, right? But it's also your approach as the waiter, which I feel like is the most, after this whole conversation, I feel like that's the most imperative thing, is your personality of how you are engaging with your guests, right? Because you don't have to be pushy and you don't have to have 10 tables, but you still can make money. You just need to know the little smooth and respectful and just friendly ways of engaging with guests, especially when it's a couple. It's the easiest sell in the world. He wants to impress her. Oh, perfect. Let's go.
So I would say 2 key takeaways from this. Number 1 is product knowledge. And number 2 is personality. 2 things that we can train our team on getting a grasp on, so that we can continue to turn these tables successfully and continue to create those memorable experiences. So if I was to think about my WTF moment in the food and beverage side, especially in high end, there are so many stories that I could tell. It's so sad. There are
I would love to hear one. I would love
I
to hear
do
one.
get it. I've had a lot of experiences on both sides, right? On the side of enjoying it and on the side of actually delivering the service. So many stories that I could think of, but difficult to narrow it down. I can probably tell you what my few pet peeves look like. But what is that to you? Is it a specific story that you can share with us, or like the worst experience you've had in a high-end restaurant, either on the guest side or on the service side? What would that look like to you?
I don't know if it's the worst, but it's like it just shows that people really need training, especially these days, especially not even these days, all the time. People need training. And I feel like what's really, really, really sad is when you order a really great bottle of wine, like a really wonderful bottle of wine, and the person just doesn't know how to open that bottle of wine, how to decant the wine, how to let it breathe, what glass even to use, what wine glass to use. I feel like that. And then also what I feel is really sad is if you are eating fish, please, can we have a fish night? Can we please
So
have
with
a fish
every
night?
example that you just mentioned, there was an image coming to my brain, right? That is so funny. Yes,
Yes.
yes. Lack of
Yes.
training drives me crazy.
Oh,
The lack
Oh,
of I don't want to sound too snob, right? But the lack of finesse
uh-huh.
or being proper when it comes to
Proper.
placing a dish in front of someone. Like, where are you coming from? Right?
Right.
Are they having an intimate conversation and all of a sudden
Mhm.
you show up and dump something
Yeah.
in front of them? I think,
Yeah.
Stephanie, you and I talked about this in one of our episodes when it came to banquets. I think it was like somebody puts the plate right in front of you with such excitement
Mm.
that it scares you, it
Yeah.
startles you all of a
Yeah.
sudden, right? So I think those are the things, without
Yeah.
mentioning a specific
Yeah.
story, those
Yeah, but
things just drive me
when you
crazy.
talk about proper, Michelle, I think it's also important that because you just said banquets, to me, a proper service in general is that everything is in synchronicity. So when we
Yes,
have a bigger banquet, can we please all
and you
walk at
should
the
not even
same
know they're
time?
there.
Mm.
You should not even know this is happening, right?
Yes.
And same on a smaller scale in a restaurant. This is why we have position numbers. This is why we have to use position numbers. This is why ladies always need to be served first. Those are all proper etiquettes and I don't want to call to snob either right now, but in European fine dining service is exactly where I would love to help everybody here, because there is ways of, when we walk to the table, can we walk with everybody's plate? Can we remove the plates when everybody at the table is done? Not necessarily when the guest itself pushes the plate away. Okay, but if not, let's remove at the same time. Let's drop at the same time, just like you said. What side, left or right? Why does it matter? It does matter because everything has a rule in hospitality.
Yeah.
It does matter.
Absolutely.
Stephanie, what about you?
Oh, I mean, a lot of it goes with the consistency. Just recently, actually, is that they were great right there up until entree, and then we ended up ordering for dessert. And while we were waiting, it looked like we were pretty much done. And the hostess actually came up to our table and was like, "Just to let you know, you're at your 2 hour time." And I was like, okay, well, where is the communication to knowing that we're still in the middle of our meal? And also, too, that as soon as our entrees hit, that's when we didn't really see the server much, and service started to now being slower. So, like, that inconsistency and that communication is because before a manager or before a hostess or another team member is going up to the table, make sure you're communicating to the server, the back server, someone that is watching that table, to knowing what's going on and why there may have been a delay. Maybe it was actually, the item was delivered from the kitchen, or the kitchen was backed up and that item was wrong on delivery, or the guest was like, oh, that has nuts in it, I didn't know that, even though it says it on the menu, or cheese or something like that, and they had to do a refire of it, and that's why now that table's being delayed. But really, that communication and consistency throughout the dining experience.
Mhm. So agreed. Communication is everything. Even at the beginning of this whole thing, it should have been talked what's going on. And even if there is a refire, that's,
Yes.
and even if it does say on the menu, this is where your waiters need to come in and be approachable to your guests. Oh, you want the salad with the nuts? Are you aware that there's nuts in there? Is there any food allergies? You know, like this is where I'm saying with like communication, and this is what needs to be taught. This is what really needs to be like, this is the vocal point of these days, because otherwise we're only order takers.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was great.
Thank you.
I know our listeners are looking at those different ways with communication, consistency, and knowing the menu. But thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Žana. And the reality for everyone out there who's listening is behind every memorable dining experience, there is a process that needs to be in place. And process is linked with training. So let's get out there, walk the floor, determine what those flaws look like, and let's go out there and train our people. Thank you so much for being on the other side.
Thank you.
Thank you.